I remember that day all too well. Rain, traffic jams, late coffee on the run, and my first encounter with her. Literally. I burst into the university auditorium a second before the lecture started, clutching a paper cup in my hands, which almost slipped out of my fingers. In search of an empty seat, I darted to the first chair I came across and plopped down on it with relief. Only this place was already occupied. "Hey!" A voice sounded indignantly from my left. I turned around and met the gaze of a girl who clearly did not expect anyone to dare to violate her personal space. Light brown hair pulled back in a careless ponytail, brown eyes that looked at me with annoyance. "You sat in my seat," she said. I quickly assessed the situation. There was plenty of room, but for some reason my brain decided that getting up and changing seats was too easy. "Is your name signed here?" I asked innocently, sipping my coffee. She rolled her eyes. "No, but I always sit here." "Well, it's always boring." I shrugged. My God, the girl took a deep breath, apparently trying to restrain herself. "Okay, sit down." I expected the conversation to end there, but no. After a few minutes, I realized that sitting next to her was a challenge. Every time I involuntarily looked in her direction, she glared at me. "Can we start with a clean slate?" I whispered as the professor wrote formulas on the blackboard. She didn't say anything. I already thought that I had lost, but after a minute she slowly turned to me and coldly said, "Emily." "Jack," I said, grinning, "glad to meet you." She didn't answer. After that lecture, I couldn't get Emily out of my head. She wasn't like the other girls at the university, reserved, a little prickly, but that's what attracted me. Of course, I knew she didn't take me seriously, but that only fueled her interest. I decided to try different ways to get her attention. I began to notice where Emily spends her time: in the library, at open lectures, in a cafe near the campus, and, of course, as if accidentally appeared in the same place. One day I sat down at a nearby table in a cafe, pretending that I was just reading a book. She looked at me suspiciously. "Are you following me? What is it?" she asked, looking up from her laptop. "Me? Oh, no." I shook my head. Fate just decided to bring us together. "Yeah, sure," she snorted. "Listen, Jack, if you're hoping I'll notice you, then..." "Oh, so you've already noticed me." I smirked. She rolled her eyes and went back to her work. A friend of mine once said that girls love poetry. I decided to give it a try. I wrote a short anonymous quatrain and put it in her textbook. "Eyes in which the light is drowning. Smile as a sunny dawn. You're so beautiful, no doubt about it. Well, just know that you're cool." I knew that the last sentence was out of style, but at that moment it seemed to me that it would add charm. It wasn't a bad idea. The problem is that I mistakenly put the verse not in her textbook, but in our professor's book. At the next lecture, he unfolded a piece of paper in front of the entire audience and read it aloud. "You're so beautiful, there's no doubt. I wonder which of you decided to confess your love to me." Loud laughter rang through the hall. I lowered my head, and Emily, who was sitting a few rows away, turned around and looked at me with undisguised malice. "Great move, poet," she whispered when the lecture was over. I just sighed. After a couple of weeks, I finally persuaded Emily to go to the movies with me. Of course, she said it was just as friends, but I knew it was a step forward. The movie turned out to be boring, but I didn't care. I was sitting next to her, and that was enough. At one point, she whispered something in my ear, and I felt that the moment had come. I turned to her, braced myself, and sneezed. Loudly, suddenly, right into her shoulder. Emily recoiled, looked at me with an expression of mixed horror and disgust, and then burst out laughing. "God, Jack, you really can ruin moments," she breathed, wiping the sleeve of her jacket. I just groaned, covering my face with my hands. That's how my third attempt ended. But I wasn't going to give up. It's been almost 2 years since we first met. During this time, I realized two things. 1. Emily is the most stubborn girl I've ever met. 2. I'm hopelessly in love with her. But despite my many, and often ridiculous, attempts to win her over, I was still just a good friend to her. We started spending a lot of time together. She no longer shied away from my attempts to make jokes, and sometimes even laughed. We discussed books, movies, went to cafes and the library. It felt like I became a part of her life, but not in the way I wanted to. One evening we were sitting on the roof of the dormitory admiring the night city. She drank coffee. I drank soda. "Jack, have you ever been really in love?" "What is it?" she asked suddenly. I almost choked. I looked at her cautiously. And you? Emily thought about it, looking at the lights below. I don't know, maybe, although, sometimes I feel like I'm looking for the wrong person. I froze. It was a chance. What if the one you need has always been there? I ventured. She turned to me, smiled, and patted me on the shoulder. That's why you're my best friend, Jack. Pain, just pure, concentrated pain. A few months later, Emily started dating a guy named Mark. He was older than us, worked for a large company, was confident and successful. In general, the exact opposite of me. Well, what do you say? Emily asked when she first told me about him. Oh, cool, I muttered, trying not to show how offended I was. I was trying to be a good friend. Truth. But one day, when I saw Mark indifferently throw her, "You're being overly dramatic," and then I walked away, leaving her standing there at a loss. I couldn't stand it. He's an idiot, I blurted out. Emily sighed. Jack, don't start. But it's true, he doesn't deserve you. She looked at me for a long moment. And who deserves it? You? My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to say. You're my friend, she repeated, sounding tired. Then I decided, if she doesn't see me as someone more, I'll do everything to at least stay close. I agreed to be her friend. But I knew that someday everything would change. 2 more years have passed. Emily and Mark broke up. I knew this would happen, not because he wanted them to break up, but because he saw how he treated her as a must, as a beautiful accessory, and Emily wasn't the type to put up with that for long. I expected her to be heartbroken, but she held on. We were sitting in her apartment, and she was lazily sipping tea, as if nothing had happened. Are you okay? I asked. She shrugged her shoulders. Yes, simply. I'm tired of being out of place. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Of course, I wanted to confess my feelings to her, but after she said, "You're my friend," I was afraid of destroying what we have. Suddenly, life scattered us. Emily got a job in another city, and we started seeing less of each other. I thought that being apart would help me cool down, but the opposite happened. I missed her even more. Every text, every random photo of her coffee or book, it all reminded me how much she meant to me. 6 months after she moved in, I decided to come visit. Well, how do you like my city? What is it? She asked, leading me through the evening streets. I don't know, he's kind of without a soul. You're just spoiled by me, she giggled. I smiled, but said nothing. That evening we walked longer than usual. Emily was talking about her job, about her colleagues, and then suddenly she stopped talking. You know, she said slowly, sometimes I feel like I've lost someone. Who? I asked, holding my breath. She looked at me as if weighing something in her head. It doesn't matter, she muttered, and changed the subject. I didn't understand it then. But years later, I realized that she was talking about me. A year later, we were back in the same city for work. Emily returned to her hometown, and now we both lived here, although in different parts. However, we met much more often. Sometimes it was accidental, and sometimes I myself arranged my random visits to her office. One day, after a long day at work, I decided to surprise her. We agreed to meet for dinner, but I was late on purpose to order her favorite dish at the restaurant in advance. She didn't know about it, but I was sure it would create the right atmosphere. When she arrived, tired and slightly upset, I noticed how her face broke into a smile when she saw what I had prepared for her. We were sitting at the table, chatting about different things, and suddenly she got lost in thought, looking at her burger. Do you remember that I hate onions? She said, looking in surprise at how I carefully removed all the layers containing onions. I smiled. Of course, I've known you for a long time. She was silent for a moment, and then looked up. Why do you care so much about me? What is it? She asked. I felt a surge of embarrassment. She was looking at me, and I suddenly realized that there was more to her question than just curiosity. It was something important, something that I could have answered in a completely different way. Because I'm just a good friend? I tried to answer, but there was not the same confidence in my voice as before. Emily exhaled and leaned forward. You're definitely my best friend, Jack, she said with a wink. I was silent. My head was full of thoughts, but none of them seemed brave enough to make a confession. But something has changed inside me. I realized that I couldn't keep hiding my feelings. I didn't know what was going to happen next, But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't just be a friend anymore. Then there came a moment when I began to wonder why I had been hiding my feelings for so long. Why have I allowed myself to be a friend for so long? Maybe I was afraid of her rejection. Or maybe I wasn't ready for such a relationship myself. But something in her eyes, in her voice, in her actions, it seemed to me that she still saw me as more than just a friend. In the evenings, I thought for a long time, argued with myself, approach or wait, and then one day, at a moment when I had almost convinced myself that I should be with her, I saw her with someone else. She came to meet me, but this time with Mark, the guy she was dating before we broke up, and he was there again. It was difficult. I saw how she glowed next to him, how her eyes were full of the very sparkle that I had wanted to see for so long. But I couldn't accept it. I couldn't see her with someone else. When she asked me with a smile if I was okay with them getting back together, I just said, "No, I don't mind." But everything was burning inside me. I had spent too much time being a friend, and now I felt all my hopes crumble. I thought I would be happy for her if she found happiness, but it was hard for me to hide my disappointment. That was the moment when I realized that if I didn't tell her how I felt, I would never be able to move on. Another 6 months passed, and Emily and Mark broke up again. I didn't ask any questions. I knew she wouldn't tell me the details, but I felt that something in her gaze had changed. She became different, somehow more private, and I couldn't help but notice that phrases about lost opportunities and missed chances were increasingly coming up in her conversation. The day she called me and offered to meet, I already knew that something was going to change. We met in the same cafe where I once tried to attract her attention, and we were sitting at a table again. Only now she wasn't looking at me with annoyance, but with some kind of slight fatigue. "Jack, I need to talk to someone," she said, lowering her eyes. I listened carefully. "Of course, what do you want to talk about? Do you remember how many years ago we were sitting here, and you said that everything will be fine if I'm around? What is it?" she asked, looking at me carefully. I felt my heart start beating faster. I nodded. "I remember. And what do you think about it now?" She stopped talking. I saw her gathering her words. I knew she couldn't say it directly, but she needed to say it anyway. It was the moment I had been waiting for 7 years. "I do not know, Jack." Her voice became quiet, almost inaudible. "I can't understand why it's so difficult. Why did I spend so much time trying to find someone else? And you were there all the time? And I didn't even notice." I couldn't stand it. I took her hand. "Because I'll always be there for you. You know that." My words sounded as firm as ever before. She finally looked up, and there was something in her eyes that I had been wanting to see for a long time. It wasn't just gratitude. It was an understanding. I get it, Jack. You're not just a friend. You were always the one I needed. I just couldn't see it." It was the moment when everything suddenly fell into place. She understood. "I finally got it. Couldn't you have told me sooner?" "What is it?" she asked with a smile. I shook my head slightly. "Did it take you 7 years to figure that out?" I replied, and we both laughed. After that evening, everything changed. We started dating. We started building something real. Despite all the years that were spent on silence and friendship, I knew I didn't have to rush, but I wanted to be with her, now more than ever. We talked for a long time, discussing everything that had happened, and finding out how far our relationship had gone. We laughed, recalled strange moments, and I felt like our future was finally starting to take shape. But the most important thing was that now I knew for sure that we were both ready to be together. A couple more months passed, and one day, when I was standing in front of her on the street, with my heart ready to burst out of my chest, I said, "Emily, I love you. I've always loved you." She was silent, and then she answered, "I love you too, Jack." It's weird, but I realized it too late. But now, I want us to be together. That moment, that day, seemed so simple, but for both of us it became the most important thing in life. Everything that we've been through, all these 7 years of waiting, doubts, delusions, it all seemed to recede into the background. I looked into her eyes, and it seemed to me that at that moment the whole world was disappearing. Just us, just this moment, and finally, what I've been waiting for. We weren't just friends anymore, we were a couple. Everything I wanted was by my side, but with that came an understanding of how difficult the path to true love can be. 7 years is a long time. We could have avoided so much pain if we had confessed our feelings to each other earlier, but it didn't matter now. We found each other. After a few months, after a lot of conversations, walks and small joys, I realized that I was ready to take the next step. We were sitting in the very place where we almost kissed for the first time, on the roof, overlooking the city, which was already part of our history. I took her hand and said, "Emily, I do not know what will happen next, but I want to spend my whole life with you. Are you ready?" She looked at me with a smile, and there was so much light in her eyes that I thought they could light up the whole world. "You have no idea how much I've been waiting for you." She snuggled up to me. "Yes, I'm ready." That evening, we began to decide how we would continue our journey. We both understood that there were many difficult choices ahead, that we needed to work on ourselves, learn to trust and love, but the most important thing was that we were together now. A couple more years passed, and here we were, surrounded by our family and friends. The wedding was modest, but the happiest it could be. I stood in front of her in a snow-white suit, and she, in her incredibly beautiful dress, looked like she had just stepped off the cover of a magazine. I never thought I'd be so happy. We exchanged rings, promising each other loyalty and love, and when her smile lit up my heart, I realized that all those years of waiting and fighting for her attention were worth this moment. When the moment came for the first dance, I took her in my arms, and the song that I had been trying to teach her to love all these years began to play on our lips. We danced slowly, as if this moment had lasted forever. We weren't just a couple, we were the ones who went through the trials and found each other. And at that moment, while we were spinning on the floor, I realized that this whole path, everything that had happened before, had brought me here, to her, to this wonderful person who has now become my destiny. "I didn't expect it to take 7 years," I said jokingly, looking into her eyes. She smiled. "But it was worth it, Jack," she replied.